He was Wall Street's golden boy. Now, Jamie Dimon is, in the words of one investigator, stumbling like an ordinary mortal. Call him a casualty of the London whale, perhaps. And as a result, the financial industry is suddenly leaderless. Who's going to fill Dimon's shoes? Let's bring Bill George back in. He's a professor of management at Harvard, a board member at Goldman Sachs. Bill, does it help Wall Street to have a figurehead like the J.P. Morgan CEO, Jamie Dimon?
Well, I think it's risky because there are multiple interests. When we say Wall Street, there are many, many interests out there, and I don't think Jamie ever purported to represent all of Wall Street. But he was a very articulate spokesman. He still is, and I'll tell you, Eric, I would not count Jamie Dimon out. This guy is a terrific leader. Okay, he came down a little bit off his pedestal with the problems on losses, but if you're going to play by the sword, you're going to have challenges and you're going to have losses, and so I think he'll come back strong. And by the way, I think J.P. Morgan will be a stronger bank after they go through what they're going through right now than they were before, and their risk management systems will be much improved. So don't count Jamie out. But I don't know if you're going to have anyone to replace him as a single leader for Wall Street, but there are some terrific leaders coming up, I can tell you that.
Well, who fills the void, say? I mean, and also remember that 11 agencies are still investigating this J.P. Morgan whale trade.
I got that, but we'll see. This is, we've had to come down to the British banks of Barclays and HSBC and Standard Chartered. Those are legal, ethical issues. To me, as far as I know, and I don't have inside information here, but this is just a loss, and a very significant loss, but it's a loss. But we'll see. Everyone's kind of piling on J.P. Morgan. Okay, I think the best commercial banker in the United States today is Richard Davis over at U.S. Bank Corporation. Okay, he's in our backyard here in Minnesota, but he is a terrific banker, and very close to him is John Stump out of Wells Fargo. You know why? These guys have stayed clear to commercial banking, and that's their field, and they're really good at it. I'm not saying they're investment bankers, but they're really good at what they do, and I think they've gone through the crisis without any particular hiccups, any particular losses, and I think you have to look at them. And by the way, Richard Davis was head of the Financial Services Roundtable, did a fantastic job. I think he'll be a very influential voice in Washington, very solid, solid as the day is long, super high integrity, and you can count on him. And I think he has a lot of credibility. He's not flashy, you don't hear about him as much, but he's really strong one-on-one. Same with John Stump, who doesn't necessarily want the limelight. Now, neither of these guys are in New York, but I think you can look at them as being very strong figures.
Well, Bill, to your point, that is the problem. None of them are in New York, and neither is Bank of America, for that matter. Right? They have a gigantic tower here in New York City, but Brian Moynihan is based down in Charlotte. So if you had to pick of the folks who are based here in New York, who could be, if you will, the voice for the street, to do what Jamie Dimon did, which is to cultivate, I mean, you can't argue with this. He does it very well, and so it came naturally to him, cultivate influence in Washington. Who would that person be?
I think Eric, I think that's a very tough call. I think Vikram's doing a terrific job at Citi, but he's got still a lot of problems undoing all the problems that Sandy Weill created. So he's got a tough job. Bank of America, look, they got way carried away with Merrill Lynch and Countrywide. I don't know. That's not on
Brian Moynihan's head. Brian Moynihan had nothing to do with Countrywide.
No, I know that. No, I'm not being unfair to him. I'm saying as a bank, they got a long way to go. And so I don't see anyone, stepping into that role. I mean, there's still no better investment bank than Goldman Sachs, and Goldman's has difficulties in the public eye, but it's performing very well, and Lloyd's a terrific guy, and I think you can see him playing behind, but he's not going to be out in a public figure, so I don't see anyone stepping up and being very visible in public in Washington and taking as strong a role as Jamie did, but I think they'll still be trying to work behind the scenes, and because there can be a lot of problems with Dodd-Frank if you just let it go. The regulations are far from being settled. Here we are 4 years from the financial crisis, and we still have a long way to go to get these things resolved. So there's a lot of detail work. These things are very complicated,
well, though,
but I don't see any single leader.
When you talk about fighting regulation and influence in some of these policy changes, I mean, is this really about money? Commercial banks have spent $61 billion lobbying Congress and regulators this year, a significant increase. Is that really what this is about?
You know, I don't think so. I think it's about sound regulations that allow our banks to compete on a world basis with the best Chinese banks, Japanese banks, and European banks. I think that's what it's really about. And yes, we have to do that. And yes, it's a very complicated matter. But by the way, Dodd-Frank only covers half of the banking market. It doesn't cover the whole shadow banking industry. And you have a lot of influential players running hedge funds, running private equity firms, and don't count them out. So I think you can see a multipolar situation, not a single person step into that role.
Bill, thank you for being with us here on Market Makers today. Bill George, great to see you, Bill. Professor of Management at Harvard University, saying he does not see a candidate to fill Jamie Dimon's shoes as Wall Street's golden boy. Coming up next on Market Makers.